Welcome to Lead with Your Voice, the leadership podcast for voice actors, creative professionals, and smallish businesses. I'm your host, Rob Sogomonian, and in case you can't tell, and for those of you who are listening to the podcast as opposed to watching it, I'm in my audio recording booth because I am a voice actor, which is why this is a podcast specifically for voice actors, creative professionals, and smallish businesses. Now, this podcast is meant for people that are looking to explore leadership as individuals or, again, smaller businesses. You might be asking yourself, what does that even mean? Doesn't leadership imply that there's like a person in charge of a group of people? How can you be a leader if there aren't any people around to lead? And that's a valid question. But the answer is actually a question of my own. And my question to you would be, well, how do you run anything? How can you be in charge of a group of people? How can you run a company, small company, large company, doesn't matter, if you can't lead yourself first? So I'd argue that you wouldn't actually be running anything without some form of leadership. So I'd ask you to consider leadership in this context by a slightly different name: self-discipline, or even better, self-direction. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions that I see when people talk about leadership is the fact that leadership does not apply to the individual. In my experience, the foundational piece of a good leader is how well they're able to lead themselves before they lead anybody else. If you've ever been on a commercial airplane, you always have that part when you're sitting down, you're getting all buckled in, and they're starting to play the safety briefing. The safety briefing comes on, and there's always that part about, in the event of a cabin pressure change, you will notice that masks will come down from the ceiling. Please put your own mask on first before trying to assist those around you. There's a reason they want you to there's a reason that they want you to put your own mask on before you help anybody else. And the simple explanation for that is, what happens if you're putting on your neighbor's mask? You haven't put yours on yet. You're putting on your neighbor's mask. Maybe they're elderly, maybe they're a child, maybe they're somebody who's disabled and just needs a little bit of extra assistance. What happens if, while you're putting on their mask, you pass out from lack of oxygen? Well, now you're in trouble, and they're still in trouble because you can't be there to help them. So you got to take care of yourself first. You have to lead yourself first before you can grow into an individual or a small business or whatever and lead other people. So, and I'm referring to notes here. I'm not coming up with all of this off the top of my head. I really wish I could, but there's too much to go into, which is why I am just referring to my notes every so often if you see me looking down. But yeah, there's a valid reason they ask you to put on your oxygen mask first before assisting others. If you're not taking care of yourself, there's a good chance you won't be able to support anybody else. So leadership when you're an individual, again, when you're a creative professional, an entrepreneur, somebody who's just starting a new business, a voice actor, any kind of actor, really, or musician, it's really all about self. I mean, who else is in charge of you if not you? But what drives you to make the choices and to do the actions that are required of you for even basic survival? Where does that direction come from? Do you have somebody like telling you to do all your stuff? Probably not. I mean, maybe you still live at home and maybe you got to, work for the parents or work with the parents to make sure you don't get kicked out of the house. But oftentimes it's us leading ourselves. When do you schedule your projects? Do you usually chip away at them piece by piece, bit by bit? Or are you like me and do you tend to procrastinate and leave them until the last minute? Why am I hosting a leadership podcast again? No. But in all seriousness, like making the decision to chip away on something versus making the decision to leave it until the last minute, that's a leadership decision. You are making the choice as the leader of you as to whether you want to tackle that project now or, well, I think I can, now's not the right time. I can get to it a little bit later. Well, eventually you're going to be rushing and then it's going to be an issue. So if you had taken the steps to be a little bit more of an effective self-direction leader and you said, hey, you know what? I actually do need to get like 15 minutes of work done today. It doesn't matter what it is. I just got to get started on something. Oftentimes, that's all it takes, and you'll end up doing, instead of 15 minutes, you'll start, and then you'll kind of get a flow going. And then before you know it, you've worked on something for an hour, and maybe you're half done with it. But at least at that point, you can be like, cool, I can take a break now, or finish it, depending on how in the flow you are, or how much other stuff you might have to do. You can make that decision at that point. But you just got to get started, and it's you that's making that decision to get started or procrastinate. Now, the key point is all of this is leadership. Now, some people don't call it leadership. They call it drive, or they call it hustle, or I've heard grit. They're great buzzwords when you're talking about like social media or trying to sell a program or something of that nature, or SEO even. If you're trying to get some SEO hits on, ooh, look at this grit that I've got. Look at how driven I am. You can definitely use those buzzwords to kind of bring people in and see what you're pitching. But at the same time, they all really just describe leadership. Leadership is a single word that describes many different facets of what a leader needs to have. Whether you're leading yourself, whether you're leading a small team, a large team, doesn't really matter. But it really describes things like influence, motivation, collaboration, inspiration, goal setting, decision-making, accountability, discipline. And accountability and discipline, I know, can have negative connotations with them, but it's not about that. And we're going to talk about that in the podcast. What is discipline? Like, why do people say you need self-discipline? Why am I saying you need self-discipline in order to be an effective leader? What is accountability? It's not always, oh, you didn't get the job done, now we're going to hold you accountable. Yes, you are holding yourself accountable. Or yes, you're holding a partner or an employee or a child, in the case of, let's say, a parent-child relationship, accountable, but it doesn't always have to be a bad thing. Being accountable just means, hey, I set these goals. Did I hit them? Yes. Great. No? Why not? And I don't mean why in an accusatory sense, because I know that word, sometimes people hear why. I'm guilty of this, and we immediately go into this defensive mode, and that's not the point. It's just literally at face value. Why didn't you hit your goal? Well, this week things came up. I got busy. Okay. Totally valid point. Do we need to change the goal? Do we need to reset? Or is the goal fine and we need to reprioritize what we were focusing on during the week? Again, not in the sense that you're in trouble and then we got to, refocus you or whatever, but just like literally, it is what it is, right? Like, Did you have to take care of all of those things? Or maybe were there some things that you could have probably put off a little bit later in order to focus on the things that were going to move your business, move the needle forward? Or were they all super important and yeah, it was just a week that got away from you? Or maybe you got sick, right? I mean, we come up with goals, we get sick. Is that what caused it? But at the end of the day, you still have to take responsibility for what happened. And that is what accountability is all about. Hey, you know what? Yep, I wanted to reach out to 100 people this week to talk about my voiceover services. Or I wanted to send 15 LinkedIn connections this week to try and create more relationships with awesome people that I think that my voice would be a good fit for. Did I hit that? No. Why didn't I hit that? Well, Monday I started watching some YouTube reaction videos, and I really got sucked up into those because you only think they're like 20 minutes long, but they end up being an hour and a half. And then I had an appointment, and then it's like, okay, great. I'm glad that all of that happened. Where can we kind of refocus and reprioritize? Maybe we'll take that YouTube reactor video and put it over here on the weekend or something like this. That's all accountability is. It's not getting mad. It's not getting upset. There's no emotion involved. It's literally just here is how it is. I'm trying to say it is what it is, but it's not. Here is how it is. What do we need to do to get closer to being able to hit the goals that we're setting for ourselves, right? How do we set our goals? That's another leadership problem or leadership challenge, I should say, that we're going to be diving into on this podcast. What do we even, what are our goals? What is our end goal? Why is that an end goal? Why are we doing what we're doing? What's our big why? I think I already talked about this right at the beginning of this kind of introduction episode. How do we figure out what our big why is? Now, my big why is empowering other people to do whatever it is. Number one, to be inspired to do, and number two, to work out how they can do whatever it is that's going to bring them the most happiness in life. I've been doing that for decades. We'll get into that in a future episode, but long story short, I love inspiring others. That's really what it comes down to. That's the reason for this podcast. I want small business owners. I want solopreneurs. I recently got into voice acting 3-4 years ago. I've been as a professional thing, but I've been doing it for decades. I've been doing voice acting since at least 2001. As soon as computers came out and I could record myself, I was making videos. I was doing voiceover for videos. I have a voiceover YouTube channel. I've got a personal YouTube channel. The personal YouTube channel has things like an entire aviation tutorial series that I recorded back in 2013. I was doing voiceover for that. I probably should have considered, well, maybe this is something I could do as a career, and I could have gotten into it back then. But again, I was kind of in the weeds and not really focusing on, oh, this is actually something that I'm good at and can do. Maybe I should focus on it. Another leadership issue, right? But it also demonstrates the amount of growth that I've gone through since the early 2000s, getting to now, going through working for my dad, going through being a software engineer, being a freelance software developer, going into working as a bartender for a while, going into getting my real estate license and working as a realtor, getting into leadership at the largest real estate company in the world. And then going from that leadership position, wanting to get into more leadership so that I could help. And all of this is for helping other people. All of it from the beginning. Working for my dad, I wanted to help out the family. We were doing inspections, termite inspections, general contracting, repairs, things like that. And at that point, when I got to the point where I was confident enough, now it was also about helping the family, but it was also about helping our clients. Hey, there's a damage issue here, right? We've inspected the home. We've found things that need addressing. How can we help the client fix the problem so that they can sell the house? Or if they're not selling, generally speaking, termite inspections are kind of closely tied to the sale of a home. However, sometimes people do the thing that they're supposed to do and get one every couple of years, and they find something that's maybe wrong but not a major issue yet. Great, we can get in there and fix it before it becomes a huge thing. Or sometimes they put it off for 20 years and then they decide to sell the house and there's been a pipe leak under their bathroom for, 15 years. Now it's a little bit of a bigger problem. But figuring out how to help the client take care of that issue, make it look good so that they can sell the house with as little cost as possible, and not cutting corners, but legitimately, like, how can we do this efficiently, right? That's all leadership. So that started probably when I was about 14, 15, working in the family business, not doing inspections. I wasn't quite there yet, but starting to type reports, starting, to answer the phones. Hello, Error at Exterminators. This is Rob. How can I help you? Right? All of that is leadership. You're teaching yourself how to be in charge of a business or yourself or whatever the case may be. So all of this kind of leads into what this podcast is about. Going from that to software was always my passion. I loved computer games. I wanted to make video games when I was a younger kid, a young warthog, if you will. And so everything that I did as a teenager, basically from probably before I even started working for my dad, was geared towards getting to the point where I felt like I could run a software development company, and I wanted to make video games. I actually started following Bungie software. If you've ever been in any of the Bungie fan stuff, when I was 15 through the release of Destiny, because we're not going to get into Destiny, I ran a Bungie fan site. And that's kind of where I really learned my leadership skills. I would go to E3 every year. I would coordinate getting badges for myself, all of my clan members, if you know what that is in video games. It's basically like a group of gamers who all play the same thing or who are all interested in the same thing. And that's where the Signear stuff comes from. So if you ever go and look at like what my company's name is, Signear Media Studios, It's my name, my internet name, Cyrix, and my best friend's internet name, Molnir. And it's Cy-Near. That's Cy-Near. And we built it that way, thinking that, hey, at some point we'll come up with a better name. It'll be fine. And we never did. So that's just kind of what everything revolved around. And everybody asks me what it is. And so now you know what it is. But we built Cy-Near back in 94, 95. So long time ago, in a galaxy pretty close by. We put all of that together, and I was the one who was in charge of everything. I was the one coordinating all of the E3 passes. I was the one helping my friends who were from all over the world. Again, this is when the internet was kind of new. So I was the one who was inviting random people from the internet to come and hang out with me at the Los Angeles Convention Center for E3. And my friends coined the term the fearless leader for me, because I would just dive into problems and start trying to solve them. Like, well, cool. How can we do this? This is something that looks awesome. Let's do it. How do we do it? How do we get into this? And we're not going to talk about, how we made it look like we were a legitimate software development company at the time so that we could get free passes. But, sometimes there are some things you can kind of work around, as long as they're not going to hurt anybody else in the process. But that's leadership. It's having a goal, in this case, how do we get to E3, and then figuring out how to do it, right? And then in this case, I had a small group of 5 at the time, and then it grew to like 7, and then it grew to 20 friends. How do we get all of them to go to? A lot of them were younger than me. You had to be 18 to go to E3. Several of them were not 18, and yet we still got them into the convention. So that is leadership. Now, it's also about making the best choice with the information that you have, and still not being afraid to pivot if you learn new information along the way. It's about accepting failure. There's going to be a lot of stuff that you try that just doesn't work, or doesn't work to the effectiveness level that you hope it will work to. It's going to be a lot of iteration. Try this. We could probably do better. Tweak it. Tweak it back. Tweak it this way. Oh, this one's actually kind of working. Now we're going to pursue it, right? There's a lot of that, but you got to accept that not everything's going to work the first time. You will get lucky. There will be times where you go in and something just works right out the gate. Not all the time. It's about being open to learning from that failure. Hey, this didn't work. Why? Again, not being accusatory. What didn't cause it to work, right? Like, there's a reason it didn't work. Let's figure out what that reason is so that we can see, is it even still a valid strategy to try, right? And it's also about being able to adapt when necessary, right? So if you're in the middle of something and you realize it might not work, but maybe there's this other way that you can kind of get around it, maybe you're going to pivot right in them. And I keep hitting my mic because I'm not used to looking up at the camera while doing this. So I'm sorry if that picks up and you're hearing it in the podcast, but I'm going to get a little bit further away so I stop hitting my pop filter. But maybe you're going to pivot in the middle of doing something, in the middle of a process, because you look at something and you're like, oh, cool. I know that this way that I've been doing it doesn't look like it's the most efficient or effective way to do something. However, if I do this instead, it looks like it might actually work better. I'm just going to jump over and try it. And oftentimes that might make it work where the original plan wouldn't. So it's about being adaptable, making a decision either way, and just sticking with the decision. Whether it fails or whether it succeeds, that's going to kind of be up to, circumstance. Not really any kind of better way to do it or to talk about it, but oftentimes you're gonna feel like things just aren't working, especially if you're doing things like direct marketing, which is another leadership thing. You're going to be direct marketing for a while. You're going to be trying these things for a while, and you're not going to be failing necessarily, but things are going to be going pretty slow. In the sense of voice acting, direct marketing is one thing that is a long game. It takes a while to build up a book of business where people are actually interested and start actually reaching out to use you for stuff. Auditioning, another one where you're going to be sending out these auditions. You're going to be sending out performances, and oftentimes you will never hear back from whoever you send the audition to. Good, Well, if it's good, you're going to probably get the job or get shortlisted. But even if it was good and it sounded fine, but you just weren't the right fit for that project, you're not going to hear back. They're just going to, oh, yeah, maybe, and then you just kind of disappear, right? So you don't know if it was a bad read. You don't know if you had audio quality issues. But you still got to do it in order to book. So there's a lot of that. But a leader, if you're leading yourself and you're submitting these things and you're not getting any feedback, which is normal from clients, you may consider reaching out to an audio engineer. There are a few that I know of. Uncle Roy is one of them. Jordan Reynolds is another one. George the Tech in our industry who are pretty well known that you can reach out to and get a studio check and make sure that your studio sounds fine. So that when you're sending out auditions, you don't have to think about that. You know that it sounds good. Now it comes down to your performance and whether you were a good fit for the role. And that's another thing with leadership. In voice acting and a lot of artistic endeavors, it's not about being perfect. There actually is no perfect. It's how well did you fit what the client was looking for. So leadership is taking those no's and just kind of letting them roll off your back, right? Like technically they're failures, but it's not really a failure. It's just not a good fit, right? Cool, move on, right? It's one of the hardest things to get your mind around when you're starting to get into something like voice acting. Now, in this podcast, we're going to be examining leadership through the lens of an individual and occasionally a smaller business. So somebody who maybe has 10 employees at the most. All of these principles will apply to larger companies. There's going to be very few things that we talk about where it's like, oh, this will never work in a company that has 1,000 people. Because all of these are the foundations. These are things that you should have at a base level if you are leading anything. As a solopreneur, as a creative professional, as a smaller business owner, these are going to be pivotal to you being able to scale your business in the future if you decide to do so. You don't have to. You can stay a solopreneur forever if you want to. A lot of people will start delegating things to things like virtual assistants. If you can't lead yourself, if you don't know what your process is for your own success, how are you going to teach a virtual assistant or a full-time local assistant or a marketing director to do the things that you want to get done so that you can grow your business, right? Like you need to be able to take care of yourself first. You need to develop the plan before you can pass it on and teach it to somebody else. So if you're talking to, let's say, Mark Scott or Paul Schmidt or some of the other marketing people who do marketing and voice acting, you need to be able to do that on your own before you reach out to delegate it to somebody else. If you can't, you got a leadership problem. So you got to start working on that. We're going to be talking about how can we be great leaders for ourselves. What will being a great leader of ourselves do for our businesses, our lives, and how is that going to change how others see and interact with us? Because you're going to go from, and maybe you already are a good leader, so I'm not trying to say that you're not and this is the only podcast you should ever listen to, because that's definitely not the case. I'm still learning, and I've been doing this for 30-something years. I'm 43 now. I've been doing it since I was 15, leadership, and consciously thinking of it as leadership. Going from then to now, I've grown quite a bit. There are people who are younger than me who are better leaders than me. Not going to lie. I'm learning every day, and I think that's another aspect of leadership, knowing you don't know everything. Being humble about it, right? Hey, I did this, it didn't, oh, I see there's a better way to do that. Cool. Let me see how I can integrate that into my business. So there's a lot of this, but it's going to change as you grow how people see you and interact with you. It's the wildest thing. It's one of those things where it's like, you got to fake it till you make it is the saying. When I got into real estate, there is a program at the brokerage that I was at called BOLD. And BOLD stands for Business Objective Life by Design. And it's an incredible program, and it's got a ton of bold laws. And it's got a ton of other things in there, such as you need to be the person you want to be. You need to be the person you need to be able to do the things that you need to do so that you can achieve the things that you need to achieve so that you can earn what you need to earn. And that becomes a cycle. So you kind of have to, as you're growing into and becoming this better leader, regardless of what level you're at, people will change how they perceive you. They will change how they interact with you because they're going to start seeing you as more of a leader in the industry. It's awesome. It's wild. It's a little scary sometimes because people start coming to you for advice. And you're like, oh, well, I don't know the answer to that. And that's actually a great answer to have if you don't actually have an answer. Because good leaders don't just give answers out of the blue. They'll actually go and say, hey, you know what? Let me get back to you. I'm going to go research that. I know where to go. Maybe you don't. I don't know where to go. Either way, let's see if we can figure this out, right? That's leadership. Now, in this podcast, I've already done it in this episode. That wasn't the point. Actually, this episode, I wrote a script, and then I kind of did a real quick pre-read for a voiceover troupe that I'm a part of. And a lot of them just said, you know what, the script is great, but it's not you, and you just need to be you. So I'm using the script as kind of a framework, if you will, for this initial episode. I didn't want to get into any of the weeds of leadership in this. I just kind of wanted to explain what the point of the podcast was. But that is the point of the podcast, I guess. As we kind of go through this, I want to share and I want to interpret a lot of great leadership principles, advice, all kinds of things that I've read, situations I've experienced, or I'm going to be bringing guests on, and we can talk about things that they've experienced that were challenging leadership conundrums or problems that they had to get through. I definitely want to be interviewing prominent leaders. I want to examine their thoughts on how leadership applies to the individual, because I know a lot of great leaders who lead companies. I know a lot of CEOs. I know a lot of people who also are CEOs of smaller companies, have maybe one person in charge. I want to bring them on the podcast. I want to interview them and kind of get their perspective on, hey, when you were starting out, what was it like? What was the most challenging thing for you? What can we pull out of this so that we can share amongst all of us smaller business owners? I also want to examine your thoughts. I want to hear from you guys. I want to hear from listeners. If you have a leadership question that you want examined, maybe you're in the middle of doing something and you're just kind of stuck and you can't quite wrap your head around it, I want you to email me. I want you to get in touch with the podcast. I have a website. It's not up yet. Still working on it as I get the podcast rolling, but it's leadwithyourvoicepodcast.com. And if you have any questions or if you have anything that you want discussed on the podcast, feel free to send an email to hello@leadwithyourvoicepodcast.com. I'll get those questions, I'll go through them, and I will start putting together episodes based on your feedback. And I want you to give me feedback if you notice me say something that doesn't make sense, too. If I come up with a leadership principle, or if I'm explaining a leadership principle, or if I'm telling you an interpretation of something, let's say we're reading a book and I'm like, okay, cool, I think this means this, and you have experience and you say, no, I've been through that situation. Here's what that actually means. I want you to get in touch with me and correct me, right? I mean, it's my interpretation. There are probably going to be several others. If it's a great interpretation, I might even have you on the podcast and we can talk about it. I love discussion. I love going over things and kind of figuring out what the best course of action. Again, it comes down to efficiency. How can we be as efficient as we can with leadership? Now, I've already mentioned it, but I want to be clear. Leadership is not about perfection. There are a ton of leaders who are far from perfect. And by the way, nobody comes out of the womb knowing how to lead effectively. Maybe Patton did, but probably not. I'm sure he learned it. I'm sure he learned a lot along the way. Leadership tends to be gained through experience, time, and experience. So again, just like voice acting, just like starting your own business, just like really anything that has any kind of value, this is not I'm going to listen to an episode of this podcast and I'm going to be a great leader overnight. It does not work that way. Leadership is a skill. It's a muscle. You have to practice it. You have to work on it. You have to grow it. You have to get better at it. It's all about time on task over time. You just got to be on it and do what you can to be as good of a leader as you can with the information you have. Now, the older you are, you're going to have more experience. That's just what it is. So you probably, if you're like my age, mid-40s, early 40s, or older, you probably already have a pretty fair amount of leadership experience. Now, there are going to be younger people who are better leaders than me. There are going to be younger people who are better leaders than you. We got to be open to listening to everybody, young, old. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. If you're just dismissing it because you have more experience or you've got a different title and your title is higher, that's not good leadership, first of all. And second of all, you're discounting a wealth of information, a wealth of knowledge that could help propel you to new heights yourself. So don't discount anything. I mean, take everything in, determine whether it's going to help you or not, and then make a decision on it. Even the most experienced leaders make mistakes, myself included. I've been making mistakes throughout this whole podcast episode. This is the first time I've done a podcast format, so it's probably a little disjointed. I have, like I said, a script. I'm kind of using it as an outline, but I've been stumbling over some words. I'm sure that the audio levels aren't going to be perfect on this one. There's probably a lot of background noise because I've got my air conditioner on because it's hot as balls here today. I've got my door closed. I'm probably going to start sweating here pretty soon because it's getting into the mid-80s in my booth right now. All leaders make mistakes is the point. The difference between a good leader and maybe a less than ideal leader is how do they deal with stepping back from an error, evaluating what the error is, what caused it, and making a decision, reacting to continue to move forward. Most of the really good leaders can do this without emotion, okay? And this includes emotion towards yourself. Oh, I tried this thing, it didn't work. Am I going to beat myself up and call myself names and say, I'm a terrible person because I didn't get this right on the first try? No, you can't do that. You got to take a step back and be like, all right, cool. Like I said earlier, it is what it is. What is it? Okay, we didn't achieve this thing. Great. Why didn't we achieve this thing? No emotion. No, because this and that got in the way. All right, were these things that we needed to get, could we have removed them? Yes. Cool. Next time we got to be better at expressing the fact that these need to be out of the way. A great example of this is you're in the middle of, let's say, doing some marketing for your business, and your sister, who you haven't talked to in 3 weeks, gives you a call. Do you answer the phone? This is a legitimate question. I want you to answer. I want you to say it out loud right now. No, you're not supposed to answer the phone. Now, if you answered, no, you're not supposed to answer the phone, then good job. That's the correct answer. It actually depends, and there's not really a black and white yes or no here. If your sister is super sick and you haven't talked to her in 3 weeks and you're like, oh, wow, my sister, now she's the priority, absolutely answer the phone. Especially if maybe you're closer to the end of your marketing, you've already sent out, 45 of the 50 marketing emails you're trying to get out that day or whatever. And your sister, absolutely answer the phone, talk to your sister. If you know that she's just calling to tell you the latest terrible joke, and you know that, she's fine and family's fine and you just are starting your marketing, or even in that case, if you're at the end of your marketing, you can always call her back when you're done with your marketing. So those are the choices you have to make as a leader, but there's always nuance. There's always there's almost never a solid answer. You've got to take the information you got, make a decision, and then just go with the decision. And sometimes you won't hit your goal because you made that decision, and sometimes it's not really going to make a difference. So you got to take all that in. Now, as another example, because now I'm reading my notes and I have a different example in here, so we're going to read this. When we're children, we generally don't have any leadership skills. Candy, give me. Ooh, yum, yay. We grab things off shelves because they're shiny and we want to play with them. And when we make a mistake, our parents ask us to do something and we don't get it done correctly, or we want to do something ourselves and we can't figure out how, we don't generally know how to deal with that. We'll throw a tantrum. We'll start crying. We'll get super upset because we are trying to process the fact that we can't do this thing that we're trying to do. And we often just feel lost without a way to fix the problem. Oftentimes until our parents step in and they have a solution because they have that experience, right? So for example, tying your shoe. Your parents might show you how to tie your shoe once or twice and then you try to do it and you can't do it. Some people get super emotional about that and they just will throw a tantrum because they cannot figure out how to tie their shoes. Great. Your parents will show you how to do it right. Eventually, after a couple more tries, you'll figure it out. And then you'll actually start probably figuring out ways to tie them faster or easier than your parents showed you. And all of a sudden, you've just gained this new skill. It's the same thing with leadership. There are going to be times when you don't know the answer to something. There's probably somebody who's already been through that. So how do you find them? What are some of the skills that you can learn from other people? What books can you read? Things like that. Now, for a very good portion, because of this, I should say, for a very good portion of our adolescent lives, we tend to think that our parents are all-knowing, right? Remember when you were a kid and mom and dad had all the answers. They couldn't do anything wrong. If you had a question, you had a problem, they had a solution, and they knew exactly what to do. Well, at some point, as we get older and we grow, we tend to come to the realization that they are just as lost as we are, generally speaking, unless they've been through that situation themselves. So even when they've been teaching us how to do things or they've been coaching us on how to achieve or approach problems and get around things, they don't always have the answer. It's not always the right answer. They might be on the fly thinking up, okay, cool, here's the problem that my kid is having. How can I help them overcome it? And then they're coming up with solutions, but they have so much more experience that when they tell us what to do, they've got that confidence behind them, right? They've been doing the best they could with the information that they had at the time, and they just have the experience to kind of put it into context. So when they are trying to handle a situation, they know how to deal with it. They know how to kind of go about it. And it's even wilder when you have this same sort of epiphany, they're not all-knowing epiphany, with a trusted mentor or a boss. Somebody who is like a mentor to you or an idol, somebody who's like, wow, this person, I want to be this person when I grow up, or when I am 5 years into my career, I want to be as great as this person over here. We think that they have everything under control till we realize they're just good at looking at the situation, evaluating what a good solution might be, and then making the decision to pursue that course of action. Ultimately, that's what leadership is. What information do I have? What am I trying to achieve? Great. What might be a good solution based on the information that I have, and what decision do I need to make? We're going to do this, and then just stick into the course, right? That is leadership. It's coming down to them having a good leadership skill set, whether they're conscious of it or not. Because our parents probably don't think of themselves as leaders necessarily, even though they are. They're leaders of the family, right? And leadership goes up and down the chain, by the way. You're going to have leaders who are, essentially your parents were middle management. Your grandparents were the executives, right? Like in a family structure, that's kind of how it is, right? Great-grandparents are the ones at the top. They're the ones who kind of like everybody listens to them. Everybody, for good reason. I'm not saying this to be flippant. They have the most experience. They probably have been through a lot more than your parents have. They've probably been through a lot more than your grandparents have. So they're kind of the ones in charge, down to the grandparents, down to the parents, down to you. But there should always be this flow of information back and forth, because maybe the great-grandparents get into a situation, technology, anybody, where they don't have the experience, but maybe the grandkids do. So now the great-grandparents can't be like, oh, well, I'm just going to dismiss everything the grandkids say because I don't understand this technology, so how can they? Like, this is leadership, and it needs to go up and down the chain. So being a good, effective leader, being humble, being open to suggestions, ultimately making a decision on your own and then sticking with it, like that is what leadership is. I hope you guys are all still awake and interested, and hopefully I'm keeping you guys engaged and intriguing you. I want you guys to be, again, I'm trying to empower other people to get to where they want to be. I want to inspire you to become a better leader as a solopreneur, as a smaller business owner, as a voice actor like me. What happens when you fail? Do you just give up? I certainly don't. You can talk to my family about that. Right now, I'm in the middle of growing a voiceover business. I have a security job, like a day job that I go to that is a great job. I love it. I'm not trying to get into voice acting because I don't like my job. I love my job. It's still real estate related. And yet, I think I can help more people through doing voice acting. So I'm pursuing that as another career because I want to help people. I want to inspire people. I want to inspire. I want people to do what they want to do. There was a movie a long time ago, very, very important movie. You might have heard of it. It was called Back to the Future. It was a great movie. And there was a quote in that movie that my dad actually had been saying to me before I even had seen the movie. And it stuck with me. And when I saw the movie, I was like, oh, that's where that's from. But it's such an important quote. And it's, if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything. And I really do believe that. I don't think there's nothing that I've ever really wanted to do where if I put my mind to it and really focused on how do I get to this solution or this goal that I haven't been able to achieve. Now, does that mean that it's always been smooth? No. There's been a lot of heartbreak. There's been a lot of challenge. There's been a lot of obstacles in the way. But if you really want it, you can probably get there. But it's going to be a leadership problem. It's going to be, how can I become a better version of myself so that I can get there? So my why, I want to inspire others is all about that. Getting people out of their heads, getting people into a leadership mindset of how can I lead myself to get to where I want to be. And that is what drives me. That is my entire purpose for being. I love inspiring other people. That's why I put together that. I talked earlier in the episode about the aviation tutorial. I am a certified private pilot. I wasn't at the time. But I taught myself how to fly. I'm using air quotes for those of you who aren't watching the video version of the podcast. I taught myself how to fly in simulators. And for me, aviation was, I don't want to say second nature, but it was fun. I was fairly good at it. And I had some friends who wanted to jump into flight sims with me, specifically a flight sim called DCS World, which is an amazing flight sim. It's free to play. If you want, go and grab it and download it. It's a combat simulator. It comes with 2 free aircraft, and I put together a tutorial on how to fly the free aircraft so that my friends who just wanted to come in to a multiplayer server and fly around with me, formation flying, things like that, could learn how to fly the aircraft. How do you turn it on? How do you taxi it to a runway? How do you take off? How do you shoot weapons if you want to blow stuff up? Like, it wasn't anything, revolutionary, but I basically became an instructional designer. It came up with a 10-episode series, and 11 if you count the map editor episode that I released later, on how to fly this thing. And I have several friends who aren't particularly inclined to technical content, so things like learning how to fly a plane, that were able to pick up and learn how to fly the free aircraft that came with the flight simulator with no problem. I mean, a little bit of problem, but practice made perfect. And now anytime they want to jump back in, especially if it's been a little bit longer, they have something to refer to. But that's all leadership, right? That is me wanting to inspire and wanting to improve other people and getting them to where they want to be. As a real estate person in leadership, when I was in real estate more recently than the flight sim tutorials. I got my real estate license. I became an agent. I very quickly got pulled into a regional trainer role as a technology director, technology trainer, because I had the technology background, being a software engineer, being a freelance developer. And by the way, I did actually go into a professional software engineering position at Future Point, working for Lagunitas Brewing Company, of all places, which was another amazing place to work. We'll get to that at some point. But getting into that leadership position, I was training agents on how to use the technology. And so I was empowering real estate agents to be able to better help their clients and not fight with the technology. And we actually ended up developing our own technology at that company to help the agents even more. And then I was teaching agents how to use that. So my entire reason for being is to empower others. Like, that is how I see myself, and that is 100% where I'm at. Which means if we're going to get into something that I need to work on putting the mask on first sometimes, right? So there are always places to grow. But it's always identifying that and figuring out what the solution is. How can I get better at that? How can I identify when maybe I'm the one who needs to put the mask on so that I can better help other people? Now, you are going to make mistakes on the leadership path. It just is what it is. There's no way around it. I've made millions, I'm sure. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have failures. We all will. Just part of the process. It's part of the learning. It's part of growing the muscle and the skill set, and it's necessary for growth. There are going to be things that you just pick up and do, and it's going to be like, oh yeah, second nature. You're not going to learn as much from that, though. When things come naturally, there's not as much learning, so some of that stuff you actually take for granted. So just be careful of that. But all of these are necessary for growth. And the real question is, are you going to let the setbacks cause you to fall apart, or are you going to learn from them and continue to move forward? That's the mindset you need to take when you're talking about leadership. As you implement leadership skills and you prioritize, certain aspects of your life, certain aspects of your business, and certain aspects of even your relationships. Again, we talked about that family leadership ladder, right? And I'm using a lot of hand gestures, so I just hit my pop filter again. There we go. You're going to focus on certain things, and other things are going to invariably lose focus. It just is how it is. There is no such thing as perfect balance. You're going to focus on work too much, and family is going to take a back seat for a bit. And then you're going to be like, oh, shoot. And you're going to focus on family a little bit too much, and then the work is going to take a backseat for a bit. And then you're going to be like, oh, shoot. And your hobbies are going to take a backseat for a bit. Like right now, getting into this voice acting career, I have a private pilot certificate. I love flying. I love going out and flying. I haven't been able to fly in over 2.5 years. So next time I go out, when I'm able to, I'm going to have to talk to an instructor. I'm going to have to take them up and get a refresher. I've been flying in a simulator, but it's not the same. And we can talk about aviation at some point if you're an aviation nut like me, but you're going to let things fall out of balance. It's going to happen. Again, it is what it is. I do what I can. That's all I can do. It's completely normal for things to fall out of balance. Completely normal. The challenge about all of that lies in deciding how or even whether you need to rebalance to reintegrate some of those neglected elements based on your new priorities. And as you improve your leadership skills, you're going to get better and better at prioritization. The balance, arguable as to whether you're going to get better and better at it. But you will get better and better at prioritization. A lot of times when we start something new, voice acting, creative endeavor, even a hobby sometimes, we tend to do all of the things that aren't important because they're the fun things. So for voice actors specifically, we want to get our demos done. We want to build our logos, and we want to build our brand, and we want to have new social media things. And we want to record things. We want to make cool recordings that show off our skills. Meanwhile, nobody knows you exist. So you probably should start working on some kind of marketing, whether it's through social media or direct marketing or something. But a lot of us put that off because it is work. A lot of us don't know where to start or how to grow those things, like the actual business, the book of business. And so it's a challenge to not let the shiny object of, the YouTube reactor videos pulling you away to take your attention when you could be better spending that hour and a half on trying to figure out what your marketing plan is, right? Leadership ends up being a sort of a dance. With all of this rebalancing, focusing, shifting focuses, what's going on, what do I need to focus on, what do I need to work on today, what is going to move the needle. So you're going to be doing this dance, and your decisions and your self-direction are going to determine your place on the dance floor. Leadership is what determines your place on the dance floor. You need to grow as a leader so that you can grow your business, so that you can then help others grow their business. Or just make more money. Really, it's up to you. For me, it's more about helping other people. But priorities. Everybody has their own priorities. Now, I hope that you get some kind of a sense in this intro episode that I have a slight idea about what I'm talking about. In a future episode, actually probably the next episode, we're going to deep dive into who I am as far as my experience and what I've done to consider myself qualified to speak on the topic of leadership in this context for small businesses, solopreneurs, voice actors, creative professionals, anybody who's trying to just grow a baseline level of leadership. Are there better podcasts than this one if you already have a great foundation for leadership? Yes, probably. I recommend Jocko's podcast, Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL. I listen to almost all of his podcasts. I'm actually catching up on his backlog right now. And I think this week is episode 500 of his podcast. I love his content. I have never been in the military. But the lessons that I get out of what he talks about through his leadership skill, through his leadership experience in the military, absolutely applies to what I'm trying to go through, like what I'm trying to teach here. I'm hoping to have him on as a guest at some point. I think he would be a fantastic person to talk to about leadership for a solo business owner. And by the way, he has another company that he, when he retired from the military, he went into business consulting for leadership specifically. I think his podcast is amazing. There are a ton of other leadership podcasts that are, they might be better fits for you. I recommend going and kind of taking a look. But I want to be kind of the laid-back leadership person who you can send questions to. I'll answer them. I'll go into detail on some things. I'll give you my experience. And hopefully I can help everybody who listens grow as small business owners, solo business owners, creative professionals, entrepreneurs, and all of that. So hopefully you stick around and you'll listen to episode 1. I'm going to consider this episode 0 because it's kind of an intro more than anything else. But that is what it is. So again, thank you for listening to the first or the 0th episode of Lead With Your Voice, the leadership podcast for voice actors, creative professionals, and smaller businesses. I am Rob Sogomonian. I'm your host. And this podcast is presented by Signeer Media Studios, which is my production company, in partnership with my voiceover troupe, Articulate Studios, which is an amazing group of fellow voice actors. We're actually coming up with some really cool content soon. We'll have other podcasts. I'm sure I'll announce stuff on this podcast for that. And I'm probably going to have some of them on as rotating guests at some point, just so that when I'm going through a leadership thing, they can kind of serve as the everyman and ask questions as we go through the podcast if there's anything that is curious for them to talk about or to dive into a little bit deeper. So if you enjoyed this pilot episode and you're interested in learning more about the various aspects of leadership and how they might apply to you as the individual leader, please subscribe through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to this, on your podcast platform of choice. That would be fantastic. Within the next few weeks, I should have the leadwithyourvoicepodcast.com website up, so we'll have episodes posted there. For now, it's just going to be available through YouTube and your podcast platform of choice. And you will eventually be able to find me on social media at Lead With Your Voice. So that's hopefully where I'm going to start posting things for this podcast. If you want to connect with me directly, you can find me on social media at Rob Sogovo. That's my voiceover social media handle. So you can go look me up there. Feel free to DM me if you have any questions about leadership. You can also visit my website at robsogovo.com. That's ROBSOGOVO.com. Rob Sogomonian VO is a little too long, although I do have that domain as well. And if you want to send any questions or comments or feedback to the podcast itself, just send it to hello@leadwithyourvoicepodcast.com, and I will be reviewing that every week, throughout the week, and replying if I need to, or if there's a topic that we want to dive into on this podcast, I will be definitely diving into it because I want your feedback. I want to know what you guys want to know about. So, closing thoughts. Even though leadership is often thought of as someone influencing a group of people, we rarely think about the fact that the most important person that we should be influenced by is also the most important person that we should be influencing. That's ourselves. I'm Rob Sogomonian, and until next time, your voice, your lead.